Hey guys, today we're talking about dividing radicals and rationalizing. Rationalizing is just a special way for us to kind of simplify square roots inside of fractions. Now I know you might be scared whenever you hear the word fraction, but there's just one big rule that we need to remember, and that is there can be no square roots in the denominator of a fraction. To be simplified, we cannot have a square root in the denominator. So we're going to be talking about all the different ways that we can cancel out those square roots. The main way is that we're going to, just like you did in elementary school, we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the same number, and that's going to cancel it out, okay? So bear with me as we go through this. We're going to start on an easy one. Let's go to number 1 here. Number 1, I have the square root of 4 divided by 81. Now this equals the square root of 4 and over the square root of 81. So if you ever see a square root of an entire fraction, that's the same thing as saying the square root of top over the square root of the bottom. Now, the reason this first one's an easy one is because we know both of these. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 81 is 9. So my answer here is just 2 over 9. There you have it, okay? That's my answer. Unfortunately, they're not all going to be this easy. Let's take a look at our next one down here at number 2. So here I have the square root of 14 over 8. Well, that just means the square root of 14 over the square root of 8. But remember, we're not done here, because it's very important that we do not have a square root in our bottom, in the denominator of our fraction. So here's what we do. I'm going to multiply to the top and to the bottom whatever the square root in the bottom is. So this square root of 8, I'm going to multiply by square root of 8, but since I multiplied the bottom by square root of 8, to keep my fraction even, I have to multiply the top by the square root of 8. Now, remember how we talked yesterday, if you multiply a square root times a square root that's the same number, the square root will cancel. Well, we're going to prove that again today. Look what happens here. Multiply both of these by square root of 8. That's going to give me the square root of 14 times 8 is going to be 112. Okay? 14 times 8 is 112. Then the square root of 8 times the square root of 8 is going to be the square root of 64. Mr. Martin, how does that help us? The square root of 64 is still a square root. Well, because 8 times 8 is 64, the square root of 64 is just going to be 8. Right? The square root of 64 is 8. If you don't believe me, you can cake it for yourself. But now let's take this 112. This 112, I need to simplify, don't I? So I'm going to take this 112, and I'm going to simplify this guy. We're going to go 112 divided by, actually, let me give myself some more space. Wasn't really paying attention there. I'm going to put 112 like down here. 112 divided by 2 is going to give me 56. 56 divided by 2 is going to give me, let's see, what does that give me? That's going to give me 28. 28 divided by 2 is going to be 14. 14 divided by 2 is going to be 7. All right, so we got a pair of 2s, a pair of 2s. So those are both going to go to the outside of this. Then I'm going to have the square root of what's left over. And left over, I have a 7. All right, so we have caked the 112. We have simplified both, so now we get 4 times the square root of 7 over 8. Here's the excellent part, okay? I can now reduce this just like a fraction. Look at this. 4 divided by 8 is 1/2, right? 4/8, 1/2. So I can rewrite this here as 1 or just the square root of 7 over 2. 4/8 reduces. There's an imaginary 1 right here. That is my answer, the square root of 7 over 2. All right, hopefully that makes a little sense to you. All we're doing is, to back up, we just multiply by whatever the square root is on the bottom. That's going to cancel out the square root on the bottom, and then we just simplify the top. And then, if we can reduce, we reduce. That's it. Okay, now let's try number 3. Number 3, I have the square root of 5 over 3. Well, that's equal, oops, hate it when it does that. All right, so that's equal to 5 over, that's equal to the square root of 5 over the square root of 3. Okay, so once again, to clear out the square root in the bottom, we're going to multiply by the square root in the bottom. So I'm going to multiply this by the square root of 3, and I'm going to multiply the top by square root of 3. Okay, square root of 3 times square root of 3. That just equals 3. Okay, remember, if you multiply the square root of something times the square root of that same thing, it just equals that number. Because think about it, the square root of 3 times square root of 3 is the square root of 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So it works out. Okay, then the square root of 5 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 15. Okay, so we're going to have the square root of 15 over 3. Let's check and see if we can simplify 15. No, can't simplify 15, so, and I can't reduce it, so that's just my answer. All right, pretty easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, now let's try number 4. So number 4, remember this is the square root of 9 over the square root of 20. Well, the square root of 9 is 3. Then I kind of have to decide, all right, what are we multiplying by? Well, I need to multiply by the square root of 20 to clear it out, right? So we're going to multiply this one by the square root of 20, multiply this one by the square root of 20, and that's going to give me 3 times square root of 20 is just 3 square roots of 20 over square root of 20 times square root of 20 is 20. Okay? All right, so there we go. Then we're going to, because remember the square roots cancel whenever we multiply two of the same number together. All right, then we're going to cake 20 and see if that cakes. 20 divided by 2 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. So yeah, it does simplify. We can pull out a 2, right? And so we're going to have a 3 times 2 square roots of whatever is left, and we have that 5 left over 20. 3 times 2 is 6. You have 6 square roots of 5 over 20. Sweet. But last step, I can reduce. 6 and 20 can both be divided by 2. So at the end, it's going to be equal to 3 square roots of 5 over 10. Now listen, if you forgot to reduce all the way and left it right here, that's okay, right? But you have to understand that in multiple choice, you're always going to see this answer, 3 square roots of 5 over 10. And we're trying to simplify it as much as possible, right? All right, guys, hopefully this makes sense to you. We're just clearing out the bottom. So let's turn the page, and let's talk about something really interesting, conjugates. Conjugates are a way where I can cancel out numbers that I don't want in the bottom, even if I have multiple numbers, okay? So, for instance, look at this 7 plus square roots of 2. That's going to be hard to cancel out because we have a plus sign and everything, but we cannot have a square root in the bottom. Remember that. Well, the conjugate of 7 plus square roots of 2 is 7 minus square roots of 2. Look. To multiply to cancel out, we're just going to multiply by the same two numbers, but instead of having a plus there, we're going to have a minus there. It's pretty cool. So that's what we're going to do here on number 5. So I'm going to multiply the bottom to clear it out. I'm going to multiply by 7 minus square roots of 2. This is the conjugate of 7 plus square roots of 2. I'm also going to multiply the top by 7 minus square root of 2. So it stays even. So there's my fraction. Let's start off by multiplying the top. We're going to go 3 times 7. That's just 21. Then we're going to go 3 times square root of 2. That's just going to be minus 3 square roots of 2. Okay, then watch how I do the bottom. We're going to take the bottom here and we're going to work it out right here, and then we're going to rewrite the answer underneath because it takes a bit longer for us to do. Okay, so to do this, we're going to have to FOIL. So we're going to go 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times negative square roots of 2 is negative 7 square roots of 2. Square root of 2 times 7 is positive positive 7 square roots of 2. And then square root of 2 times negative square root of 2 is going to be negative 2. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Square root of 2 times negative square root of 2, the square roots cancel, they go away. All right, so then we combine like terms. Negative 7 square root of 2 and 7 square root of 2 are like terms. They just cancel. Awesome. Add them together, they cancel. That's what multiplying by conjugate does. It cancels out those ones in the middle. So then that just leaves me 49 minus 2. And 49 minus 2 is, of course, just going to be 47. Okay, so here I am left with 47 on the bottom, and we're going to rewrite that underneath here. And this is my simplified answer, 21 minus 3 square root of 2 over 47. Now, in some problems, we can reduce, and when we get to that, I'm going to show you. But this one, we can't reduce. Here's my answer. We just multiply both the top and the bottom by the conjugate. It cancels out the bottom square root, and we just put our square root on top. Makes it a lot better and easier for us. Okay, let's take a look here at number 6. So number 6, once again, we're going to multiply by the conjugate. The conjugate of 5 minus square root of 2 is going to be 5 plus square roots of 2. Okay? Remember, same two numbers, just we switch the sign that's in the middle. So we're going to multiply by 5 plus square root of 2 on top as well. Okay, so let's distribute here. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times square root of 2 is going to be 4 square roots of 2. Okay, then we're going to take the bottom one and we're going to distribute this one as well. I'm going to go 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times square root of 2 is positive 5 square roots of 2. Square root of 2, negative square root of 2 times 5 is negative 5 square roots of 2. And then once again, negative square root of 2 times a positive square root of 2 is going to give me a negative 2. Okay, so now we combine like terms. 5 square root of 2 and negative 5 square root of 2 cancel. I hope you're seeing a pattern here. And so we just have 25 minus 2 is going to be 23. So I'm just going to have a 23 on the bottom of my simplified expression. Okay? All right, let's take a look at number 7. Number 7 is just one like on the front page. We're just simplifying it really nice and easy. We just need to multiply by the conjugate. Well, Mr. Martin, there's no plus or minus. How can we multiply by the conjugate? There's only one term. We just multiply by that term, okay? So it's just going to be times the square root of 2 and times the square root of 2. 3 times the square root of 2 is 3 square roots of 2. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. Remember, if you multiply the square root times the square root and we're using the same exact number, the square root just goes away. All right, our last one is definitely a fun one. Let's take a look here at number 8. All right, so number 8, we have 1 plus square root of 3 and 1 minus square roots of 3. What we can do is we can multiply both the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. The conjugate of the bottom is going to be 1 plus square roots of 3. So there you go, 1 plus square roots of 3. We'll multiply the top and the bottom by that. All right, so we're going to go 1 times 1 is 1. We're going to work, I'm going to take this and I'm going to work it out right here, okay? So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times the square root of 3 is going to give me a positive square root of 3. Negative square root of 3 times 1 is negative square roots of 3. And then negative square root of 3 times a positive square root of 3 is going to be negative 3. Okay? So there you have it. We're going to multiply these together. These two, of course, whenever we combine them, are going to cancel. So now I just have 1 minus 3, and that gives me negative 2. So that means on my fraction over here, we're going to have negative 2 on the bottom. But now, this one's a bit more complicated. We can't just distribute one of them. We've got to distribute both. And so on the top, we're going to have to actually work it out to figure out what it is. So let's take that top that we had. Our top that we had over here, right? Multiply these two together. We're going to go 1 plus square roots of 3 times 1 plus square roots of 3. Work this out, and whatever this is, it's going to go on the top of my fraction for my answer. Okay, so let's multiply here. Let's go 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times square root of 3 is square roots of 3. Square root of 3 times 1 is square root of 3. And then the square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just positive 3. Combine like terms now. 3 plus 1 is 4. The square root of 3 and square root of 3 makes 2 square roots of 3. Okay, so we're going to write this out over here. So we're on top, we're going to have 4 plus 2 square roots of 3. Then we're going to heart it. We're going to simplify. Look, we can simplify. We weren't able to simplify on any of the others, but this one we can simplify because negative 2 goes into 4 and negative 2 goes into positive 2. Okay? So here's my final answer. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. 2 square roots of 3 divided by negative 2 is negative 1 square roots of 3. So that is my final answer. Once again, if you forget to reduce, right, it's not a wrong answer. The important thing is that you don't have a square root in the denominator. But you have to understand, whenever you're looking at multiple choice, this is going to be your answer. All right? So make sure that you're working hard to figure it out. All right, guys, remember, contact me, call me, get in touch with me so that way I can help you. All right? I really do want to help you, as many of you as I can, but I need you to reach out to me. All right, guys, we have a